You probably clicked on this video because you like to play chess, but you may not quite know how to win. Well, you're in luck because this is the first video since I've been back in my series called How to Win at Chess. And this video is the first in a string of videos focusing on the principles of chess. So if you're ready, let's jump right in. There are 3 principles of chess. Some people call them the opening principles. However, I believe that you should be focusing on these key areas and principles throughout your game. These principles are controlling the center, activating / developing your pieces, and 3, protecting your king. Now, these principles aren't in any particular order, as all 3 of them are vital in attacking, defending, and ultimately winning your game at chess. This video is going to focus on the first principle that I mentioned, controlling the center. Now, before I get into the reason why we need to control the center, let me demonstrate exactly what the center is. Some of you may logically think that this dot in the middle is the center of the board, which you would be correct. However, that dot is not in play. The 4 squares around that dot, however, are. This is what we call the inner center. The 12 squares around those 4 inner squares are called the outer center. Now, you may notice when watching other chess players' games that they focus at the beginning of putting their pawns and pieces around the inner or outer center, or facing or staring towards the inner center itself. The reason for this is because you want to control the center better than your opponent. And the reason you want to control the center more than your opponent is demonstrated very nicely here. As you can see here, we have a knight in the outer center on f3, a very common move on white's first or second move of a game. The knight enjoys being in the inner or outer center more than any other piece, because when a knight is in the middle of the board, it can control or move to any of the 8 squares that you see here. This can be really helpful when attacking your opponent's pawns, pieces, or king, or in just defending your side of the board. Now, as the knight moves away from the center, it loses control of some squares. As you can see here, from the knight from f3 to g3, it can now only control these 6 squares. It loses 25% of the squares it can move to, from 8 to 6, okay? As you move it even further out, from f3 to g3 to h3, on the side or the rim of the board, it drops even more to 4 squares. That's why you'll hear a lot of grandmasters, commentators, other chess players mentioning a knight on the rim is dim, because a knight in the center is much happier than a knight on the rim. This is why we want to keep the knights closer to the center, away from the rim, away from the side or the corners of the board, okay? But the knight isn't the only piece that likes being in the center. So do pawns and other pieces. Like bishops, where in the inner center, they control up to 13 squares, and in the outer circle, 11. Now, believe it or not, the bishops rather give up those 2 extra squares from being in the inner circle and enjoy being in the outer circle, where they can't be pushed away by opponents' pawns. Now, those same pawns that accompany our bishops or bully our opponent's bishops do find great solace in the inner center, or defending another pawn in the inner center. As you can see here in the advanced French variation, white has an extended pawn chain into black's territory. This is preventing black's dark squared bishop and its kingside knight from being able to get a naturally comfortable position aiming at the center. Now, in some other openings, pawns like to take control of the inner center by planting themselves on a key outer center square, as you can see here in the Sicilian and the English openings. This way, it prevents their opponent from pushing a pawn into that key square where it can easily be attacked or taken by our pawns. And that's the name of the game with this first principle. The more you can control the center, the more squares you can move to and the more space you have available, and the less space your opponent has to control the center and move to those same key squares. Now, before I wrap this up, you're probably wondering why I didn't talk about the other two pieces, the queen and the rooks. Now, let me answer that by starting with the rooks. With the rooks, it doesn't matter on which square they are on in an open board. Whether it's the corner where they start in, they have 7 squares vertically and 7 squares horizontally that they have access to, or if they start in the center of the board, they have the same 7 horizontal squares and 7 vertical squares that they can have access to. So, it doesn't matter where the rook is, it will have a total of 14 squares available to it on an open board. However, because a lot of the times where a rook starts or ends up is behind a pawn or 2, rooks prefer open files and ranks, as you can see here. Now, if that open file happens to be in the center, like it is, then the better for your other pieces and pawns. Now that we've established how the bishops and the rooks can control the center of the board, I'm just gonna leave this here for you. Go ahead, tell me what kind of control the queen can have horizontally and vertically like the rook and diagonally like the bishops from these two positions. Just pause the video and leave a comment below. With that being said, if you've made it this far and you want to continue to learn the principles of chess and how to win a chess game, go ahead, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and be notified as soon as I upload my next video, okay? If not, I hope the rest of you have a above average rest of your day. I'm out. Deuces.